We want to welcome Dr. Sally Roesch Wagner, the Executive Director of the Matilda, Joslyn, Gage Foundation. During the service, Sally is here in the character of a different suffragist, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. You can read about her in the insert in your bulletin. Some years ago, Sally created a performance piece while studying at Chautauqua, a sermon made up of Stanton's own writings about religion. She will preach that piece for us today, every word one of Stanton's own. Dr. Wagner, we're so grateful you've joined us. Welcome.
Careful historians now show that the greatest civilizing power all along the pathway of natural development has been found in the wisdom and tender sentiments growing out of motherhood. For the protection of herself and her children, woman made the first home in the caves of the earth, then huts with trees in the sunshine. She made the first attempts at agriculture, raised grain, fruits, and herb, which she learned to use in sickness. She was her own physician. All that was known of the medical arts was in her hands. She domesticated the cow and goat, and from the necessities of her children, learned the use of milk. The women cultivated the arts of peace, the sentiments of kinship, and all there was of human love and home life. The necessities of motherhood were the real source of all the earliest attempts at civilization. Thus, instead of being called a disability, as unthinking writers are pleased to call it, maternity has been the all-inspiring motive or force that impelled the first steps towards a stable home and family life. Clearly, the birth of civilization must be sought in the attempt of woman at self-preservation during the period of pregnancy and lactation. Woman became, on this very account, the main factor in human progress. The man's contributions at this early period are nothing as compared to woman's. Her varied responsibilities as mother, breadwinner, protector, defender of a group of helpless children, raised her intellectual and inventive supremacy and made her the teacher and ruler of man. The victory of man over woman was not easily accomplished. It took long centuries to finally confirm it, and traces of the mother age remain throughout medieval times. All along, from the beginning until the 16th century, when Luther eliminated the feminine element wholly from the Protestant religion and brought the full power of the Church to enforce woman's complete subjection, we find traces of the matriarchate. Driven from the commanding position of home mother and deprived of her rights to property and children, the last fortress of the Teutonic woman was her sacerdotal privileges. She remained holy as priestess. The spirit of the Church in its contempt for women, as shown in the scriptures in St. Paul's epistles and the Pentateuch, the hatred of the fathers manifested in their ecclesiastical canon, and in the doctrines of asceticism, celibacy, and witchcraft, destroyed man's respect for woman and legalized the burning, drowning, and torturing of women by the thousands. Women and their duties became objects of hatred to the Christian missionaries and of alternate scorn and fear to pious ascetics and monks. The priestess mother became something impure, associated with the devil, and her lore an infernal carnation, incantation, her very cooking a brewing of poison, nay, her very existence a source of sin to man. Thus woman, as mother and priestess, became woman as witch. The witch trials of the Middle Ages, wherein thousands of women were condemned to the stake, were the very real traces of the contest between man and woman. Christianity, putting the religious weapon into man's hand, made his conquest complete. It was this wholesale, violent suppression of the feminine element in the effort to establish the patriarchate that, more than any other one cause, produced the Dark Ages. For the supposed crimes of heresy and witchcraft, hundreds of women endured such persecutions and tortures that the most stolid historians are said to have wept in recording them, and no one can read them today but with a bleeding heart. And as the Christian church grew stronger, woman's fate grew more helpless. Even the Reformation and Protestantism brought no relief, the clergy being all along their most bitter persecutors, the inventors of the most infernal tortures. Hundreds and hundreds of fair young girls, innocent as angels in heaven, hundreds and hundreds of old women, weary and trembling with the burdens of life, were hunted down by emissaries of the church, dragged into courts of the ablest judges and lawyers of England, Scotland, and America on the bench, and tried for crimes that never existed, but in the wild, fanatical imaginations of religious devotees. Women were accused of consorting with devils and perpetuating their diabolical propensities. Hundreds of children were drowned, burned, and tortured in the presence of their mothers to add to their death agonies. These things were not done by savages or pagans. They were done by the Christian church. Neither were they confined to the Dark Ages, but permitted by law in England far into the 18th century. The clergy everywhere sustained witchcraft as Bible doctrine until the spirit of rationalism laughed the whole thing to scorn, and science gave mankind a more cheerful view of life. In one of the essential doctrines of Christianity, namely self-sacrifice, women have been carefully trained until, as John Stuart Mill says, that has come to be their pet virtue. This is nowhere better illustrated than in their religion. Go into any little country town, and the chief excitement among the women is found in church building and decorating. The women are the chief untiring beggars of the church. They compose the vast majority of the congregations. Rich women give large sums to clear church debts. Poorer women embroider table covers for the altar. And all alike think they are serving God in sustaining the church and the priesthood. In return, the whole tone of church teaching in regard to women is, to the last degree, contemptuous and degrading. Perchance the very man educated by some sewing circle of women will ascend the pulpit and take his text in 1 Corinthians 14:34-35. Let your women keep silent in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law. And if they will learn anything, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is a shame for women to speak in the church. Ephesians 5:23. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. 1 Timothy 2:11, 12, 13. Let the woman learn in silence and with all subjection. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. 1 Corinthians 11:8-9. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. Now, my friends, what effect do you think such epistles as these, written by Paul, had on the men and women of those times? And what is the effect of sermons from such texts today, but to degrade woman and demoralize man? These familiar texts are quoted by clergymen in their pulpits, by statesmen in the halls of legislation, by lawyers in the courts, and are echoed by the press of all civilized nations and accepted by woman herself as the Word of God. So perverted is the religious element in her nature that with faith and works she is the chief support of the church and clergy, the very powers that make her emancipation impossible. When, in the early part of the 19th century, women began to protest against their civil and political degradation, they were referred to the Bible for an answer. When they protested against their unequal position in the church, they were referred to the Bible for an answer. While their clergymen told them on the one hand that they owed all the blessings and freedom they enjoyed to the Bible, on the other, they said it clearly marked out their circumscribed sphere of action, that the demands for political and civil rights were irreligious, dangerous to the stability of the home, the state, and the church. Clerical appeals were circulated from time to time, conjuring members of their churches to take no part in the anti-slavery or woman suffrage movements, as they were infidel in their tendencies, undermining the very foundations of society. No wonder the majority of women stood still and with bowed heads accepted the situation. Bible historians claim special inspiration for the Old and New Testaments, containing most contradictory records of the same events, of miracles opposed to all known laws, of customs that degrade the female sex, stated in most questionable language, and call all this the Word of God. The only points in which I differ from all ecclesiastical teaching is that I do not believe that any man ever saw or talked with God. I do not believe that God inspired the Mosaic Code or told the historians what they said he did about woman. And so long as woman accepts the position that they assign her, her emancipation is impossible. Whatever the Bible may be made to do in Hebrew or Greek, in plain English, it does not exalt and dignify woman. There is nothing so cheap as womanhood in the commerce of the world. You can scarcely take up a paper that does not herald some outrage on woman, from the dignified matron on her way to church to the girl of 14 gathering wildflowers on her way to school. I hold men in high places responsible for the actions of the lower orders. The sentiments and opinions expressed by clergymen and legislators mold the morals of the highway. So long as the church and the state, in their creeds and codes, make woman an outcast, she will be the sport of the multitude. Whatever can be done to dignify her in the eyes of man will be a shield and helmet for her protection. If the same respect the masses are educated to feel for cathedral, altars, symbols, and sacraments were extended to the mothers of the race as it should, all these problems would be speedily settled. You cannot go so low in the scale of being as to find men who would enter our churches to desecrate the altars or toss about the emblem of the sacrament because they have been educated with a holy reverence for these things. But where are the lessons of reverence for woman taught to the multitude? But why attack the church? We do not attack the church. We defend ourselves merely against its attacks. It is true that the church and reformers have always been in an antagonistic position from the time of Luther down to our own day, and will continue to be until the devotional and practical types of Christianity shall be united in one harmonious whole. To those who see the philosophy of this position, there seems to be no cause for fearful forebodings or helpless regret. By the light of reason and truth, in good time all these seeming differences will pass away. I have no special fault to find with that part of humanity that gathers into our churches. To me, human nature seems to manifest itself in very much the same way in the church and out of it. Go through the community and you can tell, who can tell, the church member from the outsider. I see no reason why we should expect more of them than other men. Why, say you, they lay claim to greater holiness. The Bible with them is the rule of life, the foundation of faith, and why should we not look to them for patterns of purity, goodness, and truth above all other men? I deny the assumption. Reformers on all sides claim for ourselves a higher position than the church. Our God is a God of justice, mercy, and truth. The church's God sanctions violence, oppression, and winks at gross moral delinquencies. Our Bible commands us to love our enemies, to resist not evil, to break every yoke and let the oppressed go free, and makes a noble life of more importance than a stern faith. Their Bible permits war, slavery, capital punishment, and makes salvation dependent on faith and ordinances. In their creed, it is a sin to dance, to pick up sticks on the Sabbath day, to go to the theater, large parties during Lent, to read a notice of any reform meeting from the altar, or permit a woman to speak in the church. In our creed, it is a sin to hold a slave, to hang a man on the gallows, and to make war on defenseless nations. We must not expect the church to leap en masse to a higher position. She sends forth her emissaries of truth one by one. All our reformers have, in a measure, been developed in the church, and all our reforms have started there. The advocates and opposers of the reform of our day have grown up side by side, partaking of the same ordinances and officiating at the same altars, but one, by applying more fully his Christian principles to life, has unwittingly found himself in antagonism with his brother. As I read the sign of the times, I think the next form of religion will be the religion of humanity, in which men and women will worship what they see as the divine in each other, the virtues, the possibilities ascribed to deity reflected in mortal beings. The new religion will teach the dignity of human nature and its infinite possibilities for development. Its believers will not remain forever in the valley of humiliation, confessing themselves in the church service on each returning Sabbath day to be miserable sinners, imploring the good Lord to deliver them from the consequences of violated law. But the new religion will inspire its worshipers with self-respect, with noble aspirations to attain diviner heights from day to day than they yet have reached. It will teach individual honesty and honor in word, in deed, in all the relations of life. It will teach the solidarity of the race, that all must rise or fall as one. Its creed will be justice, liberty, equality for all the children of earth. It will teach our practical duties to man in this life rather than our sentimental duties to God in fitting ourselves for the next life. A loving human fellowship is the real divine communion. The spiritual life is not a mystical contemplation of divine attributes, but the associative development of all that is good in human character. The Old and New Testaments, which Christians accept as their rule of life, are full of these lessons of universal benevolence. If you love not man whom you have seen, how can you love God whom you have not seen? Jesus said to his disciples, "Whatsoever you have done unto these my brethren, you have done unto me. When I was hungry, you gave me meat. When naked, you clothed me. When in prison, you ministered unto me." When the young man asked what he should do to be saved, Jesus did not tell him he must believe certain dogmas or creeds, but to go and sell all that he had and give to the poor. The prophets and apostles alike taught a religion of deeds rather than forms and ceremonies. Away with your new moons, your Sabbaths, and your appointed feasts. The worship God asks is that you do justice and love mercy. It is folly to talk of a just government and a pure religion in a nation where the church and state alike sustain an aristocracy of wealth and ease, while those who do the hard work of the world have no share in the blessings and riches, for their continued labors have made these possible for others to enjoy. Is it just that the many should ever suffer, that the few may shine? To reconcile men to things as they are, we have sermons from the texts. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The poor ye have always with you. Servants, obey your masters. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, as if poverty, servility, and authority were decrees from heaven. Such decrees will not do for our day and generation. Equal rights to all is the lesson for this hour. That cannot be, say some faithless conservative. If you should distribute all things equally today, they will be in the hands of the few tomorrow. Not if the religious conscience of the people was educated to believe that the way to salvation was not in creed and greed, but in doing justice to their fellow man. Not if altruism instead of egoism was the law of social morals. Not if cooperation instead of competition was the rule in the world of work. Not if legislation was ever in the interests of the many rather than the few. Educate the rising generation into these broader principles of government, religion, and social life, and then ignorance, poverty, and vice will gradually disappear. The reconciliation of man to his brother is a more practical religion than that of man to his God, and the process is more easily understood. The word religion means to bind again, to unite those who have been separated, to harmonize those who have been in antagonism. The interests of the race are so essentially one that all must rise or fall together. Our luscious fruits and fragrant flowers on tree and shrub must have rich soil and room for their roots to spread and find abundant nourishment, and so the highest development of the best types of humanity must find their enduring soil in the cardinal virtues of the masses. Blessed is the people which generation after generation has a school of prophets to call men back with Isaiah-like yearning to the love of the living God incarnate in man.